My name is Gabriel Perret. I will be the president of the jury. So we'll start now. Theo, you have approximately 45 minutes to present the result of your thesis.
Okay, let me do a few things. Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you for attending my defense, either remotely or physically. Despite the condition, this defense concludes 3 years of work done under the supervision of Steve Udo and Marco Cuturi. And my thesis is entitled Statistical Tools for Topological Descriptors Using Optimal Transport. So as the title might suggest, my research lies at the intersection of two fields, topological data analysis in one hand and optimal transport on the other hand. So without further ado, I will start with an introduction to topological data analysis, TDA for short, with a bit of optimal transport in between. So in TDA, we are interested in studying properties of complex objects. You can think of time series, of graph, of points sampled on a manifold. And from such objects, we want to extract topological information. So by topological information, I mean that we want to infer the presence of connected components, of loops, of cavities, and so on. And for this, we will use an algebraic machinery, which will be treated as a black box in this presentation, which is called the persistent homology theory. So when you apply this machinery to a given object, you obtain the corresponding persistence diagram. So in the TDA literature, a persistence diagram is generally defined as a multiset of points, that is a set where point can be repeated, and those points are supported on a two-dimensional open half-plane, denoted by omega in this presentation. So omega is the set of points in R2, such that the second coordinate is strictly larger than the first one, that is, point located above this diagonal. And intuitively, the interpretation is that each point in the persistence diagram accounts for some topological property you inferred when applying persistent homology to your object. So for instance, on the point cloud on the top right of the slide, we had points sampled on the surface of a torus. Intuitively, on this point cloud, you may identify two important loops, the two loops that generate the underlying torus. And these two loops are accounted by the 2 points in the diagram which are far away from the diagonal. And conversely, points in the diagram which are close to the diagonal are generally referred to as topological noise, in the sense that they account for less important, less significant topological properties. So I immediately do a small switch in the perspective by saying that a multiset of points, x1, xn, can be equivalently represented by a specific kind of radon measure, namely a point measure, that is a sum of Dirac masses. So x1, x2, and so on can be encoded, represented by the sum of delta xi, where delta xi is the Dirac mass located at xi belonging to the open half plane omega. So in practice, we usually don't have a single object. We are likely to have a collection of complex objects, and from this collection of objects, we may compute the corresponding persistence diagrams. So we have this collection of persistence diagrams, and we may want to perform some statistical tasks, statistical analysis, using these persistence diagrams. For instance, we may want to average this diagram to have an idea of what's the average topology in my observations. Maybe we want to cluster these diagrams to perform some clustering so that we gather our observation with respect to their topological properties, and so on. And to do this, you need to consider persistence diagrams as living in a space, the space of persistence diagrams, and you want to understand the geometric properties of this space in order to make use of the diagram in statistical applications and eventually machine learning tasks. So now I do a short disclaimer for those who are familiar with persistence diagrams. In this presentation and in most of my theses, I do not consider the so-called essential parts of the diagrams, point with infinite coordinates, because the essential parts are treated separately in a straightforward manner. So I only focus on the points in the diagrams with finite coordinates. The second thing I must say is that I also allow to consider percent diagrams with possibly infinitely many points, and I just ask them to be locally finite, which means that on each compact subset of the open half plane omega, I must have a finite number of points, but overall I can have infinitely many points in my diagram. Of course, in practice, this won't happen. You cannot store an infinite percent diagram on your computer, but from a theoretical perspective, this is how you retrieve a complete metric space, which is a suitable property to understand statistical properties of diagrams. So here I'm talking about completeness, I'm talking about metrics. So what are these metrics for percent diagrams? On the top of the slide, you have the formal definition you may find in the TDA literature, but maybe it's simpler to look at the figure on the bottom left of the slide. Let's say you want to compare a blue diagram with 3 points with a red diagram with 4 points. For this, you will first seek for a partial matching between these diagrams. That is, to each red point, you will assign in a one-to-one way a blue point, or if you prefer, its orthogonal projection to the diagonal. And symmetrically, each blue point that is not matched to a red point in a one-to-one way must also be assigned to its orthogonal projection on the diagonal. And then, to such a partial matching, you assign a cost, that is the sum of the lengths to the power p, where p is a parameter of all edges drawn on the matching. And among all possible matchings, you try to find an optimal one, that is one with the smallest cost possible. So, of course, this matching between the two diagrams is not optimal, but that one would be optimal. And by definition, the cost to the power 1 over p of this optimal matching is the pierce distance between the diagram, denoted by dp in this presentation. And now, once you have defined the dp between two diagrams, you can introduce the space of percent diagrams equipped with dp, which is the space of locally finite point measures, percent diagrams, supported on the open half plane omega, which must have finite total persistence. So what does it mean to have finite total persistence? It means that for a given diagram, you must be able to match each of the points to the diagonal for a finite cost. So you can have infinitely many points in your diagram, but overall you must be able to sum the distances of the point to the power p and reach a finite quantity. This is equivalent to saying that you want to be at finite distance from the empty diagram. So here you may ask, why do we use these metrics to compare percent diagrams? I mean, diagrams are measures, maybe there are different ways to compare diagrams. Why do we go for this peculiar way? Well, I won't go into the algebraic motivations behind this kind of partial matching metrics, but I will do a very concise history of diagram metrics for percent diagram. So in the TDA community, people first introduced the metric dp in the case p equals plus infinity. So in the previous formula, essentially you turn sums into maximums. And they called this the bottleneck distance and proved that it satisfied some nice stability property. A few years later, they introduced the metric dp for finite p, and they called the metric dp the Wasserstein distance between percent diagrams, relying on an analogy with an optimal transport terminology. A few years after that, an isometry theorem was proved. So essentially, very roughly speaking, people proved that the bottleneck distance is isometric to the interleaving distance, which is a metric used to compare algebraic objects. So this is where lies the algebraic motivation. Essentially, it means that when you compare persistence diagrams using partial matching metrics, you are indeed comparing the topological properties of your object in some sense. In 2011, in a seminal paper, Mileiko, Mukherjee, and Harrer introduced the space of percent diagrams equipped with the metric dp and studied some of its basic properties, in particular that it is a Polish space. And in 2014, Kate Turner and the previous authors studied the Frechet means in the space of percent diagrams. So Frechet means correspond to a notion of barycenters. I will come back to that later. But essentially, this paper is the first attempt to build a statistical object in the space of percent diagrams. Because something I must mention is that the space of percent diagrams is not a vector space, it is only a matrix, a general metric space, Polish metric space, and thus notion as elementary as barycenters can be hard to challenging to study and compute in this space directly. Now, a last paper that I must mention, which is due to Carrière, Couturier, and Udo, is a paper where authors introduced Slice-Wasserstein kernel for percent diagrams. And in this paper, authors make use of the Slice-Wasserstein distance, a tool coming from Optimal Transport, to design a kernel for percent diagrams, suggesting that there is more than a simple analogy between topological data analysis, metrics for percent diagrams, and Optimal Transport. And this is essentially when I started my thesis and when my research started. So the first thing I must mention, to be clear, is that the metric dp, although they are called Wasserstein distances between percent diagrams, are not Wasserstein distances in the way Wasserstein distances are defined in Optimal Transport literature. So let me recall what is the Wasserstein distance between the Wasserstein distance in Optimal Transport literature. It's a distance between probability measures, probability distribution. So when you want to compare two distributions using the Wasserstein distance, what you do is that you look for a transportation plan P. So intuitively, the idea is that P of xy tells you how much mass you transport from x in the red distribution to y in the blue distribution. And to be a proper transportation plan, you must satisfy the so-called marginal constraints, which tell you that you must exactly start with the red distribution of mass, and at the end of the transportation process, you must exactly recover the blue distribution of mass. And then, to a transportation plan P, you assign a cost, which is the sum of Cxy, Pxy, where Cxy is a distance between x and y to the power P. And you minimize this cost, and it defines the Wasserstein distance between your probability distributions. So, of course, here you see that there is a clear analogy between the matrix dp, used to compare persistence diagrams, and the Wasserstein metric used to compare probability distributions. However, there are important differences also that I must highlight, and two of them are that the way the metrics dp are defined in TDA literature only allows us to manipulate discrete point measures, percent diagrams, because you have this combinatorial constraint where you pick one point in the first diagram and you match it to one point in the second diagram. So we can only compare discrete measures with this definition, while using the Wasserstein distance. You can compare probability distributions with basically any kind of support, discrete to discrete, discrete to continuous, continuous to continuous, and a mix of everything. So to that respect, the Wasserstein distance is more versatile, more general than the metric dp. On the other hand, in the space of percent diagrams, because we allow to throw mass on the diagonal, we are able to compare measures with possibly different masses and even infinite masses if we want. While using the Wasserstein distance, because of the marginal constraint, you can only compare measures with the exact same total mass, because the marginal constraints tell you, in particular, that the quantity of mass is preserved during the transportation process. So, of course, these similarities and also the differences between the metric dp and the metric wp were known for long in the TDA community, but it was just an analogy, and a clear connection between these two notions was yet to come. And my claim is that having such a connection would be of interest for the first reason why it would be interesting to fill the gap between TDA and Optimal Transport is that Optimal Transport is a well-developed tool. From a theoretical perspective, it has been widely studied during the 20th century and is still studied today. You have a lot of theoretical results. And from a computational perspective, Optimal Transport has known amazing progress in the last decade. And if we were able to establish a clear connection between TDA and Optimal Transport, then we would understand how we can adapt tools from Optimal Transport to get new results, new algorithms regarding persistence diagrams. The second point, the second motivation behind the need of filling this gap is, in my opinion, that as I said, using optimal transport, you can compare more general measures, you can manipulate more general measures than just discrete measures. So establishing this connection, proposing an optimal transport formalism for topological data analysis would allow us to compare more general measures than just percent diagrams, and such general measures supported on the half plane can naturally appear in applications. And to study the quantitative properties of such objects, you cannot use the metric dp. You need a more general metric. So to support this claim, let me give an example. Let us consider the uniform distribution on the surface of a torus. And from this distribution, let us sample 500 points randomly. And let us repeat this experiment k times. So we have k random point clouds. From these random point clouds, we can compute k random persistence diagrams. And now we may want to summarize these diagrams. And one very naive but also very simple way to go is to say percent diagrams are measure. We can just sum the measure and divide by the number of observations. And we obtain this kind of empirical quantity here. And now what is interesting is that when the number of observation k goes to infinity, this empirical quantity converges to some limit object called an expected persistence diagram, which is a measure supported on the half plane, but it is not a percent diagram. In particular, Chazal and Devol proved that if the sampling process at the beginning is smooth, sorry, I'm checking it's okay here. So if the sampling process at the beginning is smooth, then the expected percent diagram will have a density with respect to the Lebesgue distribution on omega. So it means that it is atomless, and in particular, it is not a percent diagram. And now, however, you may want to treat this as a percent diagram. And if you want to state some quantitative things about this kind of object, you cannot use the metric dp, you need something more general. So, in the rest of the presentation, I will talk about what I consider to be some of my important contributions to the problem of filling the gap between topological data analysis and optimal transport. The first part of the talk will be dedicated to more theoretical results, in which in particular I will show you how you can establish indeed a connection between the matrix dp and optimal transport, and the kind of new theoretical results, the new statement you can do using this bridge. The second part of the talk will be focused on computational, the kind of computational benefits you can get, because as I say, computational optimal transport, that is numerical applications, have been widely developed in the last decade, and there are plenty of tools that we may want to adapt, provide new algorithm dealing with percent diagrams, and I will showcase this in the context of estimating Fréchet means for persistent diagrams. Okay, so now I start with the theoretical part, and this is the result of work done with Vincent Devol, which is another PhD student in the DataShape team. So with Vincent, we tried to build a bridge between the matrix dp and optimal transport until we found that the bridge was already there in a 10-year-old paper due to Alessio Figali and Nicola Gigli, which has a priori nothing to do with TDA. So in this paper, Figali and Gigli wants to model some heat diffusion process. So they consider a compact domain on which you have an initial distribution of mass, or let's say of heat here for the sake of illustration. And they say, okay, during the diffusion process, two things can happen. Either the heat move inside the domain, inside the room if you want, or it can happen that the boundary of the domain, that is the walls of the room, absorb some heat, and they can also redistribute some heat in the domain, so that you start with some distribution of heat and you reach a target, a final distribution, and during the process, either you have transportation inside the domain, or some mass can go from the domain to the boundary, and some mass can be taken from the boundary to the domain. And now, when you look at this, you're quite interested, because this is exactly what we do. This is exactly what we do when we compare persistence diagrams. Indeed, when we compare persistence diagrams, what we did is that either we moved red point to blue point, that is transportation inside the open half plane omega, or we can use the boundary of our domain, that is the diagonal, to absorb red point and also to redistribute mass to catch the remaining blue points. So to model this, Figali and Jiggy mimics the transportation problem, but what they do is that they introduce the notion of admissible transport plan. So to be an admissive transport plan is a measure supported on the closed half plane times itself, so the open half plane and the diagonal times itself. And to be an admissive transport plan between two measures, you must satisfy relaxed marginal constraints. That is, what you ask here is that on the open half plane, you must exactly start with the red distribution of mass. You want to exactly recover the blue distribution of mass. But here, this constraint only focuses on the open half plane. While in standard optimal transport, the marginal constraint would involve the whole space, so the closed half plane here. And this difference, in particular, you see that you put no constraint on what happened from the diagonal to the diagonal. You have no constraint on this. And by adding this degree of freedom, allows you to compare measures with possibly different masses or even infinite masses. And now that you have introduced a notion of transportation with relaxed marginal constraint, you can just go for, let's say, the standard way. That is, to an admissive transport plan, you assign a cost, and then you minimize this cost. And this defines the OTP between your two measures supported on the half plane. And for this to be well defined, in particular to be finite, you must enforce an integrability constraint on your measure supported on the half plane. And if you look at this integrability constraint carefully, you're quite happy, because if the measure mu is a persistence diagram, that is a sum of Dirac masses, this integrability constraint exactly tells you that you want to have finite total persistence. So these observations make the metric OTP a very good candidate to be an extension of the metric DP to manipulate more general measures supported on the half plane omega. And the first step of our work with Vincent was to prove that indeed, if you use the metric OTP to compare persistence diagram, then you recover the metric DP. While the metric OTP is more general, it can manipulate any radon measure supported on the half plane, provided they satisfy this integrability constraint. So I just do a short parenthesis. In the work of Figali and Jiggy, authors worked on a compact domain, while here, of course, the open half plane is not compact. So it requires technical care to see that what can be adapted straightforwardly, and you have some situations. In some situations it's quite harder, and in some situations it's just wrong. Some result does not hold on non-compact domain. So yes, I just mentioned this point here. And now, from now, what's nice is that we can simply forget the metric DP and use the metric OTP instead, because it's just a more general object that allows us to manipulate more general measures supported on the open half plane. And that is a radon measure satisfying an integrability constraint, and I call the resulting space the space of persistence measures, which is a larger space than the space of persistence diagrams. So what can we do when we consider persistence measures instead of persistence diagrams? Why is it nice to have this extension? Well, because, for instance, we can study expected persistence diagrams I just mentioned before. So let me briefly give the formal definition. We consider probability distribution supported on the space of persistence diagrams. So basically something from which you can randomly sample persistence diagrams. And then to such a distribution P, a probability distribution P, you can assign an expected persistence diagram, EP. So EP is a measure supported on the half plane omega, open half plane omega, and the mass EP gives to a set A is, by definition, the average mass, a diagram sampled with respect to P, would give to this Borel set. And the expected persistence diagram is a Radon measure, it's a persistence measure, but it is not a persistence diagram in general. And thus, if you want to do some quantitative statement involving expected persistence diagrams, you must use the metric OTP. For instance, you can prove a nice stability result where you can prove that the OTP between two expected persistence diagrams can be controlled by the Wasserstein distance between the probability distributions they come from. And here, what is important, aside from the stability itself, is that you cannot state this kind of result using the metric DP. You first need to introduce the metric OTP as a generalization of diagram metrics, standard diagram metrics. Another important result we managed to prove with Vincent is a characterization of convergence in the space of persistence measures and thus of persistence diagrams in particular. Namely, we proved that a sequence of persistence measures converges with respect to the metric OTP if and only if you have vague convergence along with convergence of the total persistence. So let me recall what is vague convergence of Radon measures. It is convergence in duality with continuous, compactly supported functions. So intuitively, what this theorem tells is that on each compact subset of the open half plane, everything goes as expected. If you have a sequence of diagrams, for instance, asymptotically inside the compact, you will have the good number of points, and points will get close to each other. Meanwhile, the convergence of total persistence here controls points that might go very far away from the diagonal, or mass that would go far away from the diagonal. For instance, if you have one point in your sequence of diagrams that goes away from the diagonal, this would prevent convergence of the total persistence. It won't prevent vague convergence, but it would prevent convergence of the total persistence and thus OTP convergence. What you don't control with this characterization, I mean what is not controlled here, is what happened very close to the diagonal. And it means that during the convergence process, some mass or some points can vanish on the diagonal. So the idea is that when a sequence of diagram converges, points can vanish on the diagonal and otherwise everything goes as you might imagine. This idea was already there in the TDA community, but this is the formal statement of what it means to converge for persistence diagrams, and this also holds for persistence measures in general. And it is interesting to have a clear understanding of what it means to converge for persistence measures and diagrams, because understanding convergence helps you to study, for instance, continuity. So here I very briefly mention something. We can prove using this theorem. We can characterize continuous linear vectorization. So linear vectorization are maps that pick a persistence diagram and returns some vector in a Banach space by integrating the diagram against some map. That's for short, and we can exactly tell when such maps are continuous using the previous theorem. I won't go into detail for the sake of concision, but I would be glad discussing this after the presentation. So that's the kind of result you can get using the theorem and using this formalism involving the metric OTP, inspired from optimal transport with boundary à la Figali MGE. And now for the second part of the presentation, I will talk about the kind of computational benefits you can get from this bridge, from this connection, and how you can adapt tools from computational optimal transport to persistence diagrams, and I will showcase this in the context of estimating Frechet means. So as I target numerical applications, I will just focus on finite sets of finite persistence diagrams, things that you can store on your computer basically, and thus for a given set of persistent diagrams B1, Bn, I define the notion of Frechet means. So to be a Frechet mean of this set, you must be a minimizer of this functional, this energy E. So intuitively it means that a Frechet mean is a diagram that is as close as possible on average to each of your observation BI. In the context of percent diagrams, this problem was introduced and studied by Turner, Mileiko, Mukherjee, and Harrer. And among other things, they proved that this energy is not convex in the sense that it has global minimizers, which is nice, but it also has local minimizers. And they also proposed an algorithm that is guaranteed to converge to such a local minimizer. And without going into the algorithmic details, the idea of their algorithm is that given a current estimate of your barycenter A, you compute an optimal partial matching between A and each of the BI, and then you update your estimate A. And you repeat this until convergence. And here, an issue is that computing optimal partial matching between two large diagrams can be expensive. And you have to do that n times. So if n, the number of diagrams, is large, this is going to be very expensive. And you have to repeat this until convergence. So in practice, on large sets of large diagrams, this algorithm won't be tractable. So how can we do, what can we do differently? How can we do what can we do better somehow? Well, the idea we propose is to say, okay, we won't work in the space of percent diagram because it makes the problem hard. We will rather work in the space of persistence measures instead. That is, we will minimize this energy over the space of persistence measures instead of diagrams. And thus, we must use the metric OT2 instead of the metric D2. And now that we have this new energy that we want to minimize, few things that can be observed is that this energy becomes convex in some sense, and it has global minimizers, but you don't have any local minimizers anymore. And of importance, among these global minimizers, you still have persistence diagrams. So even if you're working in a larger space, you didn't make the problem strictly easier. And here, a short parenthesis, which is, I think, an important idea, is that in general, working in the space of persistence measures instead of space of persistence diagrams can be helpful when you consider optimization problems involving persistence diagrams. Working on this larger space can make your problem significantly easier. And now, what I want to focus on in the rest of this presentation is that in practice, you can approximate global minimizer of this energy efficiently using tools from optimal computational optimal transport. So the first step to design an algorithm to do that is to observe that, of course, in practice, we can't minimize in the space of persistence measured directly. At some point in practice, you need a finite set of parameters to optimize. So a natural idea, I must agree, would be to parameterize your barycenter in the following way. Say, okay, my barycenter will be parameterized, I mean my candidate will be parameterized by a sum of masses times Dirac on locations, and I will optimize masses and locations. If you do that, unfortunately, you're very likely to propose an algorithm similar to the one of proposed by Couturier and Doucet in their 2014 paper, and in particular, you will obtain the resulting algorithm will be non-convex. So, if you want to improve on this to get a convex problem, you must go for an Eulerian approach. So it means that we will put a grid on the ground space omega, and we will turn our diagrams into histograms. So here on the left you have a diagram. On the middle you have an histogram if you pick a small grid size, and in practice you're likely to pick a larger grid size to have an histogram slightly more convincing. And here what we do is that instead of optimizing masses and locations in particular, we will look at these histograms and optimize the mass in each bin of the histogram. And this approach will lead to a convex problem. Okay, so now we have turned our diagrams into histograms. So, okay. And we want to use tools coming from computational optimal transport. However, the issue is always the same. Our histograms have different total masses, and we want to take the diagonal into account somehow. So how can we, what's the solution to this problem? Well, it relies on the following fact, that is, the OT2 between two histograms can be formulated as a standard optimal transportation problem, where here your optimal transportation problem involves a transportation plan P, which must have as marginals, of course, not A and B, this won't be feasible, but A plus an additional coordinate in which you put the mass of B, and B plus an additional coordinate in which you put the mass of A. So that, of course, these two marginals have the same total masses, so the problem becomes feasible. And also this additional coordinate will help us to account for the diagonal. And for this, we use a cost matrix C that has a block structure. So C has a very big block, D squared times D squared, where D is the grid size, the grid parameter. So the very big block tells you how much it costs to move from one bin in the histogram to another bin. And you add one row and one column in C, which intuitively tells you how much it costs to destroy mass in a bin and to create mass, namely the distance to the diagonal. And eventually you put a 0 on the bottom right entry of this matrix, which tells you that you won't penalize what happened from the diagonal to the diagonal. Okay, so now we are quite satisfied because we turned our problem into a standard optimal transportation problem. And now we face a new issue, a more practical one, which is that standard optimal transport is not tractable on large scales, on large histograms. So, and here, as we want to take histograms of size 100 times 100, for instance, this is going to be an issue. So, how can we improve on this? Well, we rely on a now routinely used tool in optimal transport, that is adding an entropic regularization. So the idea is to say, instead of looking at the standard transportation problem, where we would minimize sum of P, I, blah, blah, dot C, we add a regularization term, which involves the neg entropy of the transportation plan P, and regularization parameter epsilon. And I call this quantity, so this regularized problem, I call this, with a slight abuse in the terminology, the synchrone distance between the two histograms. And now, why are we happy to look at this regularized problem instead of looking at the standard one, the exact one? Well, because this is much easier to solve. And this can be solved in practice by just iterating a simple loop. This is called the Synchron algorithm. So you just have to iterate the following loop where for this, this loop relies on a matrix K, which is the termwise exponentiation of minus C divided by epsilon. So termwise exponentiation, so nothing hard to compute here. And then you just introduce two variables U and V, and you iterate the following operations, where here you have a termwise division, so once again, nothing complicated, and the only bottleneck operation is to compute k.u and k.v. And so by just iterating this loop until convergence, or in practice until reaching some stopping criterion, you get an estimate of your synchron distance in a very simple way. And what is nice, is that furthermore, you will also get a gradient of the synchron distance with respect to one of its entry. So here, for those who are familiar with computational optimal transport, there's a few things I must mention, which is that contrary to what happened in standard regularized optimal transport, here you see that the entry A appears on both marginals in your constraint set of the transportation problems. So the gradient and the calculation are slightly different than the one you would have in the standard computational optimal transport paper, but things can be adapted, and as we have access to a gradient of the synchron distance, of course we have access to a gradient of our regularized energy, where we use the synchron distance instead of the OTP. And this energy is convex, so we can simply go for a gradient descent to minimize this regularized energy. Now there is one last problem to address, which is that in practice, the matrices P, C, and especially K on which the sinkhorn loop relies are going to be very large. They should be of size d squared plus 1 times d squared plus 1. The plus 1 accounts for the diagonal. So this is the kind of matrices when d equals 100 that you don't even want to instantiate. Fortunately, what happened is that the bottleneck operation k.u, or k.v of course, can actually be reduced to perform only d times d matrix multiplication. So you go from about d squared times d squared to d times d, which is of course much better. And this relies once again on adapting tools from computational optimal transport, namely convolutions. And now you can iterate the sinkhorn loop by only manipulating matrix of size d times d. You would never need to instantiate k, c, or p. And as it only involves matrix manipulation, this can be run efficiently on a GPU and also in a parallelized way. So you will get, these are very important and nice computational properties of this algorithm. So I end this presentation with a very, very simple example on a toy set of diagrams to illustrate our approach. Assume that we want to average, compute a barycenter for these three diagrams, red, blue, and green. So in the middle, you have the kind of output you get if you use the algorithm, the combinatorial algorithm proposed by Turner and co-authors. Here you can have different outputs because of non-convexity. Due to non-convexity, different input might lead to different output of the algorithm. While our approach outputs an histogram that, thanks to convexity, does not depend on the input. So, also in terms of running times, here you have a short comparison done in a log-log scale. So here basically the take-home message is that on large sets of large diagrams, that's the regime for which we designed our algorithm. On large set of large diagrams, we go order of magnitude faster than the combinatorial approach, the previous combinatorial approach. Of course, our approach is not perfect. One of the drawbacks is that it relies on many parameters, the regularization parameters, the stopping criterion in the sinkhorn loop, the grid size. But for this price, you get convexity, you get an approach that would scale on large sets of large diagrams. And a last point is that although we designed this approach for percent diagrams, interestingly, it can be readily used with persistence measures. You can approximate distances between persistence measures with our approach and even barycenters for persistence measures. While, of course, the combinatorial approach, which relies on the metric dp, won't be able to won't work with persistence measures. So this ends this presentation. If I may summarize the most important take-home message in very few words, the most important thing is that yes, there is a clear connection between the matrix dp used to compare persistence diagrams and optimal transport, and finding this connection, establishing this connection, allows us to provide new theoretical results regarding persistence diagrams, new algorithms, new computational tools in TDA, and to consider more general objects than just persistence diagrams, which might be of interest in topological data analysis. There are a few things I couldn't mention during the presentation for the sake of concision. In particular, a paper I contributed to where we addressed the problem of learning linear vectorizations of persistence diagrams. And finally, I also think that this work might open the way for interesting research topics. First, basically any tools of optimal transport might be, we can try to adapt such a tool to topological data analysis. In particular, I am interested in the kind of theoretical properties you have for regularization of the metric OTP. You can look at gradient flows, for instance. I also think that persistence measures are interesting objects. In particular, as I said, you had this isometry theorem for the bottleneck distance, d infinity. an open question that maybe might be of interest for the algebraic community would be, can this isometry theorem make sense for the metric OTP, this more general metric? And finally, last thing that I may mention is that, to my knowledge, this is the first use case of optimal transport with boundary a la Figali and GE. And maybe this might motivate some research, more research on this topic in the optimal transport community. And last thing, in TDA, the case p equals plus infinity is clearly of interest. Here, the algorithm I presented works only for finite p, for instance. And the computational optimal transport community generally focus on p equals 1 or 2. And maybe this might be a motivation to design algorithm using the Wasserstein infinity and variations distances in optimal transport. I thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, I will be very glad to answer them.